Blessed be the name of the Lord. Today I want to explain why I no longer believe in a pre-trib rapture. I used to for 24 years, pretty much ever since I was saved. We need to believe in many of us believe in rapture, and we should. And I am a big fan of the rapture. I am not a rapture denier. But a pre-trib rapture is impossible to prove going by the Bible. Arguments for a pre-trib rapture are very weak. Usually what's quoted is, we get caught up in the air. Sure, yes, but when? Then we get changed in a twinkling of an eye. Sure, yes, but when? And by the way, twinkling of an eye doesn't tell us when it will happen. It only tells us that instead of dying, we will be transformed into new eternal bodies. And that way we will make it into crossover into eternity. Because usually people have to die, right? If they wanted to go to heaven, you die and then their soul or spirit goes to heaven. And at the end of times, people who died before will be resurrected. So what about those who are actually alive at the time of the second coming? Well, those people will be transformed into new eternal bodies. And there's also some very weak arguments for the rapture, such as we'll have mansions in heaven. Well, of course, we'll have actually places in heaven. It doesn't say mansions. But this is one of the weakest arguments for a pre-trib rapture ever. It doesn't actually prove much, only that we will be in heaven. But rapture, pre-trib, how? And rapture is not a secret event. I don't know who came up with that. I think it was Hal Lindsey again. But trumpet will be blowing, Jesus will be coming with glory, there will be lightning across the sky. It's not gonna be a secret event. And also, why would the dead be raised first? If the rapture is an event to save us from terrible events on earth, to remove us before the tribulation happens, why would the dead, why would they need to be removed, raptured? Their suffering is over. They wouldn't be affected by any tribulation. And nobody mentions Matthew 24, the whole chapter. Usually it's only Thessalonians. And that's because it doesn't line up with their sequence. And of course, we have also Matthew 24, 29 to 31, and Mark 13, verses 24 to 27, where it says, after the tribulation of these days, Jesus will gather his elect. And also we have Daniel, that says that the beast will wage a war on the saints and will overpower them. And the same is actually repeated in Revelation 13. And those are serious issues for the pre-trib 7-year tribulation rapture theory. There is a rapture, it's just not pre-trib, not a rapture preceding a 7-year tribulation. And the 7-year tribulation is the key here. I did believe in a pre-trib rapture mainly, now I realize, because I accepted that the tribulation goes on for 7 years. And after that, Jesus returns. And if that's true, then of course we would have to be taken out before the tribulation, because we're not appointed to wrath. That's 1 Thessalonians 5:9. I fully believe that. We cannot be in the tribulation because we're not appointed to wrath. This is one of those unshakable truths on which we should base our theology, our understanding of God. We are saved, and God would never pour out his wrath on us. We can go through trials and tests and tribulations, but not his wrath. So the question is, the tribulation, the 7-year tribulation, is that the wrath of God described in the book of Revelation? Would the rapture save us from the tribulation or from God's wrath? And the Bible actually says no. We wait for Jesus, that's in 1 Thessalonians 1:10, who delivers us from the wrath to come. Jesus doesn't deliver us from the tribulation to come, but from the wrath. There's a big difference between the wrath and the tribulation. Tribulation is something every Christian goes through, but the wrath is poured out on God's enemies. And in Matthew 24:29, it says, immediately after the tribulation, Jesus comes and gathers his elect, which is us. People who talk about a 7-year tribulation often say that the first half is a tribulation and the second half is the Great Tribulation, and there's no such thing in the Bible. Those two terms are used interchangeably. In Matthew 24:21, it says that for then there will be a great tribulation, such as not has been from the beginning of the world and never will be again. It's called Great Tribulation. But after that, it says in verse 29, immediately after the tribulation of those days. It doesn't say after the great tribulation of those days Jesus will come. Also in Mark, Synoptic Gospel, which is a corresponding passage talking about the same thing. Mark 13:19, it says, for in those days there will be such a tribulation as has not been from the beginning of the creation and never will be. This is clearly the same as Matthew 24:21 in Mark 13:19. And it doesn't say great tribulation, it just says tribulation. So these two are just used interchangeably. Another problem is the days of Noah. In Matthew 24:38 says, for in those days, before the flood, they were eating and drinking, marrying and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark. And they were unaware until the flood came and swept them all away. And so will be the coming of the Son of Man. It will be, before Jesus comes, it's going to be very much like in the days of Noah. The element that's going to be the same is the unawareness of people just going about their lives, having no clue that the world as we know it is ending. Everybody's just living their lives, and suddenly a flood kills them all the sinners, all the unsaved. And that agrees with 1 Thessalonians 5:2, where it says, the Lord will come like a thief in the night. People are saying peace and security, then sudden destruction comes upon them. So by the way, the thief in the night, that's not the rapture. That's second coming. It's pretty clear. There's the same kind of going about their lives, tra-la-la-la-la, everything is dandy, and then sudden destruction, which is the equivalent of the flood that sweeps them all away. So the world will be completely unaware of the second coming. But how could the world be unaware if there's a tribulation or a great tribulation going on around them? People would know that something is not quite as it's supposed to be. It doesn't sound like the world will be going through a great tribulation before the rapture or before the second coming. So where's that great tribulation? The destruction is sudden and unexpected, just as in the days of Noah. Sure, the world was evil, and there will be more wars, and there will be earthquakes, and so forth. But there will be no great tribulation because people will be saying we have peace and security. And how often can people say that in this world, that we have peace and security? It looks like suddenly the wars will quiet down. It doesn't sound like a 7-year tribulation before Jesus comes. That peace and security, by the way, that's the covenant signed with the beast from Daniel 9:27. There will be peace and security under the beast. And that's why people will be saying that everything is fine and sudden destruction will come and they will not escape. And this is from the book of Daniel, the covenant with the beast. The beast overpowering God's people, that's also in Daniel. And that led me to this correct view about the rapture. As the inconsistencies grew, I decided to start at the beginning, which is for me the book of Daniel in this case, because Daniel is like revelation of the Old Testament. Not all is revealed, and even Jesus said that it's difficult to understand, but Jesus also validates the book of Daniel because he said, when you see the abomination of desolation spoken of by the prophet Daniel, Jesus brings it up again, so obviously the book of Daniel cannot be doubted. And as I was reading Daniel 7, which talks about the Antichrist, the beast, waging a war on the saints, 3.5 years, it didn't look to me like a tribulation at all. I didn't get that picture of tribulation and difficult times. All it was that the horn, which is the beast, made war with the saints and prevailed over them. That's 7:21 in Daniel. So there will be a persecution of Christians. But the rest of the world will be worshiping the beast. We know that from Revelation 13. So this was Daniel 7. Now in Daniel 9, it doesn't sound like a tribulation either. He shall make a covenant with many for 1 week, and for half of the week he shall put an end to sacrifice and offering. So that's when I started asking myself, why are we talking about a 7-year trib? Everything hinges on that 7-year tribulation. We cannot be in the tribulation, so we are saved by rapture. Well, is the tribulation the wrath? And the reason we talk about the pre, mid, post-trib, and so forth, it's all because of this uniform period of a 7-year tribulation. And I understand that comes from Daniel, this covenant made for 1 week, which apparently refers to 7 years. But the covenant doesn't mention any tribulation. It's a covenant. And apparently it's a covenant of peace. It's going to be broken in some way halfway through. But the first 3.5 years, and even later after it's broken, there's no mention of tribulation. So the whole sequence of the last days is based on a false premise. So we shouldn't even talk about pre-tribulation rapture, mid-trib, post-trib, and so forth, because it's based on a false basis of a 7-year trib. And there's no 7-year tribulation. So for pre-tribbers, there's this question. We cannot be in the tribulation because we're not appointed to wrath. So is the tribulation the same as the wrath of God? How come the book of Revelation talks so much about the wrath? When is that the wrath happening? The wrath of God, not the wrath of Satan, the wrath of God. For mid-tribbers, the question is, after the tribulation of those days, Jesus comes, because that's what it says, right, in Matthew 24:29. So is that the end? After the tribulation of those days, Jesus comes, so is that the end? And the mid-tribbers, they think this is all going to last 3.5 years. I thought Jesus comes at the end of 7 years, not in the middle of the tribulation. So where's the wrath of God after that anyways? So who came up with a 7-year tribulation? Where is it in the Bible? I couldn't find it. It's not in the Bible. And every single pastor today repeats 7-year tribulation, which proves to me that they don't really read the Bible for themselves. They tickle the ears of their tithers. And of course, every single YouTuber repeats the same thing. And I used to as well. So I'm not looking down on anybody. I only discovered this by digging into Revelation and Daniel and the rest of the verses 5 months ago. We are now in mid-May, and I've been studying this in January for about a month. It's very difficult, but God says, seek and you shall find. So I encourage you to really look into that, because I feel like we have been duped. The church has not been doing its job. The pastors, the writers, the authors, theologians, all of them. You have to reject this unbiblical idea of the 7-year tribulation if you want to understand the last days. If you rely on the 7-year trib, everything just falls apart, and that's why there's so much confusion about those pre-trib, mid-trib, post-trib raptures. There is a rapture, and it's just not pre-trib, it's pre-wrath, which happens halfway through the 7-year period described by Daniel, that covenant. After first 3.5 years, Jesus comes and raptures his people, and then he pours out his wrath on his enemies. And we will be raptured not to avoid the tribulation, because Christians do go through tribulations, but we'll be raptured to avoid God's wrath. And then all the Christians, the dead ones as well, will be gathered, because this will be the sort of beginning of ruling on earth. It's going to start with God's wrath. So we will be ruling with him as we go into the millennium. And by the way, the tribulation described in Matthew 24, it's very Jewish. It's for the Jews. It's Jerusalem surrounded by armies. It is the troubles of Jacob. Israel again becomes the center of the world. The times of the Gentiles are done. We're going back to the beginning, full circle. And all of this is in Matthew 24, Revelation, Daniel, and a few other verses scattered here and there. But Matthew 24 and Luke 21, those are the underpinnings of this whole theology. We go by Matthew 24 and it all makes sense. I'll keep explaining all of this since this is only beginning to gain ground, this view. So it needs to be explained a little better because I understand how different it is from everything that we had been told by the church in the past, 30 years or more. Thank you for listening, and may the Lord richly bless you from Zion. Take care. Bye-bye.